Hi, it's Mary Ellen with IT in Canada, and I'm here today at the VMware Forum 2011 speaking with James Beer, who's the Director of Data Center Strategy and Operations at Bell Canada. James, thanks very much for taking the time to speak with me this morning. I appreciate it. I wonder if we could start by your giving us a brief description of your virtualization journey at Bell Canada.
Yeah, our virtualization journey really started in 2006. And at the time, in 2006, we had a decision to make around what we were going to do with our Windows NT platforms, which were approaching end of life. And we had an opportunity to jump on a new architecture that would be much more efficient. So we did a number of migrations. We migrated about 400 servers off an NT platform and onto a virtualized platform, which gave us a number of different advantages relating to resiliency and currency and failover and that kind of thing. The other thing that drove it was virtual desktop. We have call centers internationally that, in terms of image management, it became very difficult to manage a number of different workstations all across the world. So being able to centrally manage that image and have them remotely access that virtual desktop, it gave us a number of advantages. So really, virtualization for us started with, again, that NT environment end of life and this VDI push. That's where it got started, and we grew from there.
Mm-hmm. And your cloud strategy for the future?
Step one in moving to cloud is virtualizing your compute, as well as virtualizing your storage, which we've already done, and even your network. So yeah, I mean, beginning to move to that virtualized platform gives you the flexibility, so that if you want to build your own private cloud, if you want to migrate into a vCloud, a VMware vCloud, for instance, you could. So yeah, it lays the foundation for more virtualization in cloud.
And eventually for Bell Canada potentially offering services as a service provider to your customers.
That's right. I mean, we've applied the learnings that we've seen internally around what kind of workloads you can start with virtualizing. The case study that I went through earlier today with the financial organization was an example of that. And we've parlayed that internal experience into virtualization solutions and what are becoming cloud solutions now.
Okay. Carriers are different than a lot of organizations, a lot of enterprises, in that you have a very complex combination of overlay networks. So there could be the optical layer, IP networks, the Ethernet switching layer, other types of networks. So it's different than the typical enterprise. How does this impact data center consolidation or virtualization projects that you might engage in?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I would say that networks are becoming more important. With virtualization, you have the need to move workloads around very quickly. For disaster recovery and failover perspective. So, having that network and having a very low latency, high throughput capability networks is becoming even more important. With thin client, it's moving some of that traffic onto the network. So it is becoming more complex, and the need for more network into your enterprise data centers is becoming more important. It's also creating some challenges with regards to what to be done on the data center floor. How do you deliver that kind of traffic into a more condensed hardware footprint? So I think in some ways that's the bigger challenge, and that's where we're starting to see moves away from traditional copper-based cabling into fiber cabling and higher throughput networks altogether.
Mm-hmm. My last question has to do with the energy component. You mentioned in your presentation that you had achieved significant energy savings through your virtualization process. Can you tell me how you go about quantifying that as you're building the virtualization business case?
Yeah, I mean, we have a metric around per physical server space and power costs, which accounts for the uplift in cooling as well. And then we have another metric for virtual servers, and for their physical space and power requirements. And obviously there's a big delta between the two. What's interesting is that Bell is, we don't, within the IT organization, we don't see those costs directly, but they're applied at a business case level, and almost as an invisible tax that gets applied for every business case. Have you accounted for the power and space required for this physical server, this virtual server? And that tax is levied at every business case, and those questions are asked before funding is granted. So it works quite well. The way that we measure it is really just an industry standard, kind of per rack. It doesn't take into account the number of servers or the particular type of servers, but it's a pretty sound estimate for what we think they cost, and the results are, wherever possible, you virtualize, and that's been the strategy.
Mm-hmm. So would it be fair to say that at Bell Canada, the energy cost or the energy budget is something that's still managed by the facilities people, and then your virtualization projects are managed by IT?
That's right. That's right. And and that's it's an interesting organizational issue, and one that isn't uncommon for a lot of enterprises. The key is to have good communication and collaboration between your facilities and real estate and your IT organizations. Agree on a strategy, agree on demarcations. But it's just so important that you have IT people thinking about power. Historically, they haven't thought about power, and that's changing. And with some of the organizations that have sprung up that monitor and govern that kind of those kind of initiatives, that's helping. And I think over time you'll probably see a shift as data centers move more into a kind of a pure IT domain rather than a real estate domain. But getting IT people to think about power is difficult, but I've seen a lot of progress in the last couple of years, and the next couple of years I think there'll be a lot of promise in improving that.
And one of the ways to move that forward is to give a good example of some of the significant savings that can be achieved. Can you help us with a metric?
So we always look at particular initiatives where we have consolidated, and we had one at our primary data center internally, where we're reducing about 400 servers to something like 30 servers, each one of those servers consumes about the equivalent of about $500 a year in power and cooling costs. So the math is fairly easy, and it's rough math. The thing is that those, if you look at an example like that, the results aren't necessarily going to blow your CFO's socks off, right? So, but it's little wins, and it's drops of water in a lake that make a difference over time, and you add it up across a lot of systems and across a large organization like Bell, if everyone does their part across the organization, it can make a big difference.
That's right. James, thanks very much. I really appreciate your insight.
My pleasure.